Good afternoon. Welcome to our In Conversation With event, part of our series to bring together alumni, current students, parents, and other GDST family members and showcase the achievements of a range of GDST alumni. We're very honoured to have Emilie Weaving with us today, Shrewsbury High School alumna and Trailblazer finalist of the GDST's 2022 Alumna of the Year competition. Before we get started, I'd like to tell a little bit about Emilie. Emilie has built an impressive career in the traditionally male-dominated world of engineering. As a mechanical engineer, Emilie has 8 years of development and testing experience from diesel engines to motorcycle helmets and military vehicles. She spent 4 race seasons working as a mechanic in the British Superbike paddock alongside 6 years experience working as a motorcycle mechanic in dealerships. Emilie is passionate about encouraging women to pursue a career in the field. She is a STEM ambassador, has volunteered extensively as a GDST alumni network mentor, and writes a highly successful blog, The Female Engineer. So, Emilie, let's get back to the beginning of your story. Can you tell us a little bit about your school days at Shrewsbury High School? What part, if any, did the school play in nurturing your interest in engineering?
Yeah, so I was at the high school between sort of 2003 and 2008. So did my GCSEs and then sort of went off elsewhere. So my main foundations, I would say, really was to give me really strong skills in my maths and science. Particularly maths at the high school was a really big one for me. Really enjoyed it and had some really great teachers over the years, which really sort of helped that backbone in terms of engineering. I'd say a lot of the skills I learned were sort of the overall things that you apply, particularly in engineering. So your analytical skills, always kind of pushing yourself forwards and challenging things, being curious, asking questions, being organized, being well disciplined. All those skills were probably the biggest ones that I learned at the high school, which I've carried through the rest of my career, to be honest. But yeah, particularly those things in engineering are really important.
Thanks, Emilie. As you know, STEM, women in engineering and DT are all close to my heart. But were there any other influences that inspired your love for engineering?
Yeah, so from a young age, really, I've kind of been really interested in engineering. My primary school, I went to the Old Hall School in Wellington, and they had a really good DT department. So we sort of had access to lathes, vacuum forming machines, all sorts of. So I used to come home with all sorts of sort of wooden contraptions that I'd built from a really young age, which really kind of sparked the hands-on side, I would say. And sort of alongside that, my family is a motorsport family. So my granddad used to race it in the motorcycle Grand Prix, like in the 1950s. So he raced at the Isle of Man TT, where there's a corner named after him. So I've kind of been brought up in a motorsport crazy family. So like both my parents rode motorbikes. So we always had kind of bikes in the garage, kind of helped my dad tinkering in the garage on various bits of woodworks and projects, and spend hours going around the roads of Shropshire on the back of my mom on her bike. So I've had kind of a lot of influences really over the years, but never kind of been forced into anything. It's just kind of been naturally cultivated, I'd say.
I guess there's a lot of people going to engineering through a background of tinkering with things and seeing how they work.
Absolutely. I think it's because it's such a kind of the fundamental side of it. I think if you enjoy sort of wondering how things work, taking them apart, putting them back together, and yeah, tinkering with anything, it's a sign you do want to be an engineer.
Absolutely. And what do you love most about your job, Emilie?
So for me at the moment, it's the variety of work that I have. So each day is sort of very different, and I'm currently working on a really, I can't talk too much about what I'm specifically doing in the sort of the defense industry, but it's a really kind of high profile military vehicle that's sort of going to be coming out in the coming years. So the chance to be a part of a program like that, which is kind of a sort of once in a generation kind of opportunity as an engineer, it's going to be pretty exciting when they get rolled out, and we can sort of say that it was I was kind of a part of the development of that. It's going to be really fun.
That does sound really interesting and exciting. We'll look out for it when it eventually comes out. Um, I've really enjoyed, I know others do enjoy your blog, The Female Engineer. Why did you set that up, and what kind of responses do you receive from other female engineers or girls and women with a passion for engineering?
So it's something that I founded it during COVID. So during sort of I was furloughed from JCB we had, I think it was about 3 months off in the summer, which was great because the weather was amazing. But I thought I'd take the opportunity to kind of make the most of having that time that I would never have had normally. And I kind of reflected and realized that the STEM ambassador work that I like to do and things like this, you're limited in a way to the amount of people that you can reach and you can affect at a certain time. And so in terms of being able to hopefully inspire sort of future generations and people, kind of a lot of curiosity. So for me, I'm really passionate about talking about what it is to be an engineer, because I think it's a real misconceptions about what it means. So when you sort of say you're an engineer, or someone says, would you like to be an engineer? You kind of imagine a probably middle-aged white man in a hard hat. And that's the demographic. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think it is. You'll just be like on a construction site, or which, there's loads of different areas, but you might be in a real specific role that you're not interested in, whereas actually it's such a wide ranging field. You can go into so many different careers, have like all sorts of different opportunities. So it's kind of being able to convey that. And I love writing, to be honest. It's something that I've always really enjoyed doing. So I thought I would maybe combine the writing side of things, having just like a bit of fun doing that, along with trying to have a bit of outreach. So kind of, explaining, helping people get into engineering, a bit of an insight into what my kind of lifestyle's like in terms of what being an engineer has enabled me to do. And then also having a forum really for other female engineers, because there's sort of relatively few of us. It's quite nice to be able to reach out to different people across different companies, different countries, everywhere, and be able to feel like you've got a bit more of a community and people that can support you if you want a sort of female perspective on something, or you can talk together about gender pay gaps and those kind of topics. I think it's really important to try and have that, because we won't naturally get it from our workplaces.
Thanks, Emily. And I can absolutely recommend it. I did have a read through it prior to meeting Emily. So any of you who are listening, the Female Engineer blog, well worth a read. So Emily, the next few questions have been put forward by our brilliant head girl team. So next one is, what is one lesson from your time at Shrewsbury High that's helped inform where you are today?
So I think probably, or if I was going to pick one, I'd have to say like the knowledge that if you're committed and you work hard at something, if you really put your mind to something that you want to achieve, whether it is in your career or whether it's something completely different, I honestly believe that you can achieve that. And I think that's something that the high school really instilled in me, is that gave me that confidence that actually, you put in the hard work, you can kind of reap your own rewards really, and you can achieve whatever you want.
Brilliant, thank you. And you'll be relieved to know that's still the same message that the girls in the high school hear on a daily basis and across other GDSD schools. So thank you for that.
It's really important.
Sorry, Emily.
It's really important.
Well, absolutely, 100%. I completely agree. You were the Triumph Motorcycles keynote speaker at the annual Triumph Design Awards, and this was something very outside of your comfort zone. Do you have any advice on how to prepare yourself in order to challenge your comfort zone and say yes when opportunities arise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that was very much stretching myself out of my comfort zone, sort of being asked to sort of stand up and give this keynote speech in front of a room full of all sorts of people. There's really a lot of people from Triumph and a lot of students and stuff. It was really cool though. But when these things come up, I try and visualize how I will feel once I've completed the thing, like however painful or difficult or stressful the thing might be. If I can visualize how it would make me feel afterwards, so if I can kind of imagine that sense of achievement or accomplishment or potential networking opportunities it might open up or anything like that, I kind of force myself to get through, and I can see what the benefit is going to be. And by that same question, really, if I visualize what I think I'm going to get out of it, and actually I don't think it's going to be something particularly positive, if it's something I maybe think I should do, but actually when I think what would benefit me or what would benefit others, if I can't see that clearly, then it's something I would probably turn down. So it's quite a good way of kind of making sure I spend my time in useful ways and like to most help others and myself.
That's really interesting, actually. And how did that particular event go?
yeah, so it was really successful actually. So I hadn't realized as well, as part of it, they wanted me to actually like hand out the awards as well. So that was pretty cool. So it kind of got to be really quite involved with it. But yeah, I think it was probably about a 15-minute speech, which I kind of wrote a little bit in advance, but kind of just winged on the day, because I think it's a lot more natural when you're just kind of talking through where you're at. So I was pleased with how it went. And then afterwards, we had like a bit of a session where people could just come up to me and speak to me, like kind of milling around afterwards. And I had some really, really positive feedback from people, which was lovely to hear. And I had a few people sort of reach out through LinkedIn afterwards, and a few connection requests and all those kind of things. So it was really nice.
And that networking aspect is really important as well, isn't it? Particularly,
Yeah.
like you say, where it's a field predominantly where men are in those roles. Sort of networking with perhaps other potential female engineers is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. Networking is such an important part of, I think, of engineering, particularly sort of in my field. But I know that a lot of industries, it's a lot about who the people that you know, the people that you meet, and
Mm.
it always pays to be kind to people, and you never know who you're talking to at the end of the day.
Really good advice. Thank you. Did you ever have a moment of questioning whether engineering was truly what you wanted to do in life? And if you did, how did you approach that sort of debate and reassure yourself that it was the right decision for you?
So I've kind of always had engineering in my brain. I think when I was about 11 years old. So actually pretty, yeah, it would have been pretty much just before sort of starting at the high school. I wrote my mom a letter, or it was just like a letter that my mom still got. And I basically said, I was detailing what I wanted to do when I was older. And I basically said how when I grew up, I wanted to be Valentino Rossi's crew chief. And that was my goal. So sort of MotoGP racer of the day.
Yeah.
Um, and that was something that I was, at that kind of age, was something I was thinking about and wanting to do, so much so that I wrote it down. And that's kind of something that's still on the, still on the maybe on the cards these days, although he has retired now. But that engineering has always kind of been there. So I wouldn't say I've questioned if it's what I wanted to do, but I've also there's been a couple of things I've also been interested in. But I think with engineering particularly, because it's a subject that's so wide, I kind of knew that if I went into this and I wasn't so sure, I could pivot and do something else,
Mm.
which is a little bit how I've got here. So from starting out as a motorcycle mechanic, as you mentioned in my intro. So yeah, spent a few years doing that, absolutely loved it. And then it got to the point where I thought, actually, no, I do want to pivot, go more into the engineering side, get back into the academics, get my degree, all those kind of sides of things. So just yeah, pivoted from being a mechanic into being an engineer. And like even now, I feel like I could pivot into something else, even in my 30s if I wanted to go. It's kind of the beauty of knowing that you don't commit to like one track, and that's what you've got to do for the rest of your life.
That's a really interesting point actually. And most of the people listening today won't be obviously at that stage of their careers. How and you use the word pivot quite a few times. How did you know at particular key points in your career that it was right to change direction slightly? What sort of information did you sort of gain that you then knew that it was the right thing to do?
So some of it would be sort of itchy feet. So so going from mechanic into engineering, I kind of looked at that my original goal of being a crew chief, and I was interested in the difference between where I was at as a mechanic and to where I could get into crew chief and kind of that next kind of higher level. And that was where it was like, okay, maybe looking into engineering as the next kind of step would be a good idea. And then a lot of it has been circumstance and the people I've been with at the time as well. So the last race team that I worked for, the crew chief was an engineer at JCB, and he was basically talking to me about higher apprenticeships, which are now sort of more known as degree apprenticeships, because they weren't a thing when I was at school and sort of doing A levels and things. Degree apprenticeships just weren't, that wasn't an option. So I'd never heard of them. So he was telling me about JCB and all these great apprenticeships they do, and he was like, "Oh, I wonder if you should maybe apply." And I was 24, so I was like, "Well, I'm a bit old to be an apprentice." But he passed my CV on to the sort of the head of HR at JCB, and I think it was like the week before he sent that through. one of the people who was already offered a place on the higher apprenticeship had dropped out, and they hadn't planned on like adding an extra person back in for that sort of September intake. This is in May time. But she saw my CV and was really interested, so got me in for an interview and then had an assessment day and stuff. And they offered me like a last minute entry into this. So that was kind of a circumstantial pivot to a degree. So it was sort of wondering what the next step was. And then this opportunity presented itself. And sorry, when I got offered the job, I just took it. I knew it was such like the best way of going. So yeah, mixture really, but
good advice. Yeah, it's good advice for people to, like you say, grasp the opportunities when they arise is really important as well. And do you have, Emilie, any advice on navigating the transition from Shrewsbury High School or any other school into the world beyond school?
So probably my main thing, which we've already touched on slightly, is networking. I think developing that skill is really, really important, and it's whichever way you go about that. So whether it's about attending events, especially now we can do sort of more virtual events, I think it's really, it's really important. You can actually get to a lot more things. So yeah, going to some events. I've done a few sort of women in engineering panel events that I've spoken at. Events like that to attend are really interesting in whatever field you might be looking into, because it's a real good back and forth. You can speak with the speakers and you can connect with people. And it really helps give you an insight into different careers, different opportunities, different routes. And you never really know who you might meet when you go to these things. And I think another important thing I found from sort of going from school into like the real world, I suppose we could call it, is kind of the evaluation, like actually stopping and thinking if the goals and everything that you're looking to achieve are your own, or if what you think you want, or if what you've been told you want, or anything from whoever it might be. I think it's really important that you're following what you want to be doing for you, because I think otherwise it's going to be a lot harder as you kind of go through into work if you're doing something that you think you should be doing but actually you don't really enjoy.
Great, Emilie. And that sort of links to something you said earlier actually about being offered things that you then have not taken up the opportunity because if it doesn't sort of align with what you think others will get out of it, what you'll get out of it. What sort of gives you the confidence at times to sort of make decisions that to not take an opportunity or to go in a slightly different direction? Is there something that gives you that confidence to do that?
So it can be a downfall because it doesn't mean you're not always going to make the right decision, and it's I guess being brave enough to know that if it isn't maybe the right decision or the right move, that actually something else will come along, or you'll be able to make the best of the situation, make it work. So I think it's just kind of having confidence in yourself, really, that it'll work out.
Brilliant, great, thank you. Slight gear change now. What would your 3 fantasy dinner party guests be and why?
That's a great question. So I think someone I would love to sit down and have a conversation with is a guy called Tim Ferriss, who is an author, sort of businessman, and he does a really good podcast. And he's someone that has actually inspired quite a lot of my in the last probably like 5 or so years, kind of pivots that we're talking about, and confidence into building a lifestyle that you really want to live. So he has a book called The 4-Hour Work Week, which is, well, yeah, clearly everyone would like to work 4 hours a week, but there's a lot of concepts in there that are really interesting. So there's things like the principles of kind of taking mini retirements instead of in whatever period of your life. So maybe in like your 30s and then one in your 40s, take like a few months off and do whatever it is you might want to do, and kind of really grabbing opportunities and kind of developing a lifestyle. So he's fascinating. He's a really interesting guy and does great interviews with people on his podcast. So he'd be a really good person. I think would be good. Get some good advice from him in person. Who else would I say? Actually, probably. So Jerry Burgess was Valentino Rossi's crew chief back in the day when I was aspiring to be that person. So it would be actually really cool to have him there to hear about what that was like in the sort of the peak of Valentino's MotoGP successes, and hear about that role as well, So find out what it does mean, what it's like to be a MotoGP crew chief, and if it's, well, I know it won't be as glamorous as you probably think it would be, and like, the hard work and everything. So he would be really cool to speak to. And then I would then probably have to go for a random. So I'm really into my music. Um, so Miles Kennedy is probably my favorite artist. So he is the lead singer for Alter Bridge, and he also sings with Slash in his side project. And he just seems like an awesome human. And his music has got me through a lot. So I think I would also like him to be there.
Sounds like a great evening. Um, Going back to Tim Ferriss and the mini retirements, have you had a mini retirement yet? Have you had one of those in your working career?
Not yet. So it's something that we are working on doing. So we're looking at having sort of a maybe six. We'd really like to have a 6 week break in the next sort of couple of years and do a bit of a longer traveling. So it's something we're just trying to kind of schedule in and work out with our current roles how we can make that happen. But my company that I work for is particularly supportive of having like little sabbaticals and things, because they can see the benefits that you get really from being given that little bit of time to go off and explore something. And then when you come back, you're just energized, you've experienced all sorts of new things. And I think it's a win-win for everyone, really. So, but it's something we are definitely planning on being part of our lifestyle.
Yeah, it sounds a great thing, and for the reasons that you've mentioned, that the benefits for the company in the sense that if you come back re-energized and ready to go, you'll probably be more creative and more productive, I would imagine. So yeah, it sounds like a
Absolutely.
really good idea. Um, we have several pupils who now have pursued degree apprenticeships in engineering. You mentioned that earlier, and I was reading yesterday that there's been a 12% increase year on year in people applying for degree apprenticeships. So it's obviously a growing area for students these days. And some of ours notably are with Dyson and Airbus and Mott McDonald, and they're thriving in the industry. So does the industry feel more equally balanced with men and women now, or do you think there is still a way to go to get equal representation?
There's a long way to go. Um, I think this year, I think it was in the UK, the percent of female engineers is, I think it was 16.5%, which is clearly pretty rubbish. it's it's really noticeable. So in my work, I think we have 320 engineers now, and I would say absolute maximum of 20 of them are female. Um, it's great because we are getting through a lot of our apprentices. We're getting a lot more ladies coming through. And you asked, I believe we are starting to see a change and a shift. And I've got quite a few sort of good friends who are, and peers that are kind of my age and sort of, 20s and 30s and kind of coming through into the industry. So I think we will get there. And well, I believe we'll get there. I never think it's going to be an exact 50-50, just for, various reasons. But I think if we could get to the position where we were maybe more like 35 to 40% female, I think that would be awesome. And for me, a lot of it now that I'm kind of interested in, because the stats are, like you said, everything's going in the right direction sort of slowly. But the thing that's remaining stubborn is women in leadership positions in engineering, particularly. So if you're looking at sort of like chief engineers and those the higher level um, positions, the female representation is really, really poor. So I've been across quite a few, three companies in an engineering capacity, and like JCB being one of them, which is massive. And I would say I haven't met a female chief engineer yet. And there was one lady who was like a sort of engineering director in the whole of JCB. So that's the side I think that needs to start changing.
And as you say, I think sadly it will take time for that balance to be addressed.
Mm.
But like you, I'm confident it's going in the right direction.
Mm.
So what sort of advice would you give maybe people listening today in terms of their own paths into engineering? Any advice you could offer them? Because obviously we need that supply of female engineers coming through more now
Yeah.
than ever. Any tips for people?
Well, I would definitely say do not let it put you off going into engineering. If I have had such positive experiences, particularly sort of in the kind of R&D side of mechanical engineering. I've had some absolutely amazing male allies, worked with some great people that have given me like so many good opportunities and really supported me and have never made me feel any different. So I think it's something that we should start be looking at as almost being an advantage, because if you can, if you're doing a good job, you are going to naturally stand out that little bit more from the, maybe if you're going for a promotion, if you've maybe got 8 male colleagues and there's you, if you're doing a cracking job or maybe a similar kind of job and you get that promotion, they think, you got to use it to your advantage, I think. So it's always just motivated me really. But in terms of sort of roots in, I think your degree apprenticeships we're talking about are a really, really good way of getting into the industry. Gives you a really good sort of first-hand look at what you're going to be doing. And it also means you can work for a company, get your degree paid for, which is awesome, get your experience. And then if you decide that where you've done that isn't exactly a great fit, you can take those sort of, so for me, it was 6 years with doing the apprenticeship and then not having to pay your degree back sort of time. So if you take that sort of 6 years experience and then you go into a different industry like I did, it's invaluable really, those skills that you've learned. You've never going to sort of lose any of that, and everything is relatable in engineering. Your basics, you can just put it into a different industry, or if you want to do something completely different, you'll be able to use those skills again. So I would say don't dwell on something being like your final decision as like, okay, this is where we're starting out our journey, but it's definitely not going to be where you end up.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. And then Emilie, what are your personal strengths that you believe have contributed to your success?
So I guess it might have come across so far. So I'm not afraid to take chances and go for things. I know that if something doesn't work out, I will always learn. There'll always be a great lesson from it. It's, I think I've across my career. So when I changed from working in a dealership to making my first move into a race, like the race team, I needed some time off to be able to go and speak to the race team. They basically approached me and they'd invited me up to their open day, and they said, we'll have a chat with the crew chief and see if we think you're going to fit well into the team. But the dealership I was working for wouldn't let me have the time off to go up there. I didn't say what I was doing. I just said I needed the day off. They wouldn't let me have it off. And the guy was a bit of a strange character. And he basically said, well, if you want this day off, you're going to have to leave. So bearing in mind, I've been there for like 3 years, part-time and then full-time as well. And so I went home, spoke to my mom, we talked about it, thought about it, and I went in with my notice the next day. And I just believed that this is what I knew in my heart, that was what I wanted to do. And I believe that was my route to getting there. And if that hadn't have worked out, I'd have had to work something else out. But it's having that confidence, which has really been instilled by like, particularly my family. And I would say, being at the high school, and just that confidence that every step doesn't have to be like really perfectly thought out and okay. It's actually all right to just think, oh, let's just see how this is going to go and follow it through, and know that something else will work out if that particular thing doesn't.
I love it. That's really interesting. And I'm sitting here trying to work out where you described the sort of the environment you grew up in, with lots of tinkering and lots of sort of engineering going on around you. Therefore, the environment was such. And then I'm thinking about your personality being suited to engineering. I'm trying to work out which came first, or whether it was a combination of both, actually, because you seem to have a very logical approach to situations that are not necessarily engineering situations, but might be life situations. But equally, you're accepting that sometimes things don't go as you'd hoped as well, which again, in engineering terms, that also happens. So there's a sort of real, I guess, sort of link between your personality and the world that you're in. And I wonder if you've got any views on which came first, I guess, really.
That is a really interesting thought. And I think it's probably something personality wise that has always kind of been there perhaps. And then I think as kind of I've been through sort of various situations and sort of like the family support I mentioned, and having that confidence and belief. And when I'm saying that I want to be Valentino Rossi's crew chief, sure, we'll support you, you can be his crew chief, that's gonna, it's having that has really developed all of it. And then going through school, having that confidence kind of built up, just kind of it's sort of has feels like it has come together. So it's interesting when you mentioned those in terms of the like engineering side or the skills that kind of come with that. I think they have kind of developed hand in hand, really.
Brilliant, thank you. We love that you were covered in the Institute of Mechanical Engineering magazine with another SHS alumna, Dr. Alice Bunn, MBE, who is CEO of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. How important is it for women in the industry to celebrate and support each other?
Firstly, she is absolutely awesome, and it's so good to have a female CEO of the IMechE. I think that is exactly what we need. That kind of level of representation is exactly what we need. I think it's amazing. And supporting each other is absolutely the key. It's the foundations really of being successful and being able to hit these sort of things I've sort of mentioned about increasing representation and getting people into positions like CEOs and sort of the senior leadership. It's about recognizing that we aren't in competition with each other. I think that's a big thing. And I think that was something when I was sort of first getting into being a mechanic. I was like, I was the sort of female mechanic, and then if there was another female mechanic, I was almost a bit like, oh, but that was my identity, and it was a bit of a strange one when I was younger. And then as you kind of grow up, you realize that it's great to have these allies, and it's really important to support each other, because the successes of other female engineers just improves the opinions and people that are looking into getting into engineering for all of us. So for me, when you can see these people doing incredible things, we're much more visible, and it means that a lot more girls from high school will be thinking, oh, this is what I can achieve, because you can see these people.
No, I completely agree, and we were very fortunate to have a call with Dr. Alice Bunn with one of our students who was interested. It was when she was part of the director of the European Space Agency. One of our students contacted her because she was interested in going to the world of space engineering, and she was very generous with her time to sort of speak to our students. That was a real bonus for us. Can you share some standout moments in your career that have been especially meaningful to you?
So I think probably my favorite racing sort of career moment would be the last year that I was working in the British Superbike Championship. The team I was working for partnered with Moto Rapido Ducati, who are one of the big sort of factory British Superbike teams. And me, the crew chief who got me into JCB, and our rider, we formed like a little kind of standoff team from our main team, and we ran inside the garage and under the banner of Moto Rapido. And they had a rider when I first joined, and then this second season when we were going to be working out of their garage, wearing all their kit and sort of being really part of their team, they had John Hopkins riding for them, who was a MotoGP star from when I was watching MotoGP when I was really, really into it when I was younger. And for me, it felt like such a kind of full circle moment. And it was just incredible. I'll never forget. So the crew chief was sort of similar age to me, so had also grown up on the same era of MotoGP riders. And the first time the rider when John Hopkins walked in to the garage that first time, we both looked at each other and we were like, we don't know whether to like burst into tears or what. It's just such a surreal moment. And it was, yeah, that was definitely the peak of my BSB career, I would say. It was just that being alongside him in the garage and him knowing who you are, and just we weren't working on his bike, but it was just to have such an icon as part of the team. It was really something special. So that's been great. And then I would say with my engineering, so when I was at JCB, I won like a few awards. So I won the sort of internal JCB Apprentice of the Year. I was the Midlands Engineering Apprentice of the Year for the EEF, which are now Make UK. And then based on that, we had to go into the sort of I got into the national finals. And I was like overall runner-up. So I was the runner-up National Engineering Apprentice of the Year. So kind of having that run of kind of apprentice awards was pretty awesome. And I was not expecting it in the slightest. And the awards were again actually a time of pushing myself out of my comfort zone, because JCB had sort of approached me and said, we would like to nominate you for this. Are you kind of happy to be nominated? And I had to sort of go through like the application process, but as part of like the final shortlisting, you had to deliver a presentation to a panel of like 4 people. So kind of putting myself into that situation, I knew that was what was going to happen, and that was something I actually really wanted to do, because again, I thought, well, you know, if you can deliver in those kind of situations, it's going to help you out when you're interviewing for jobs in the future or any of those kind of situations. And then for the so as part of the national final, I had to produce the presentations. They just, when you got there, you did your sort of panel interview bit, and then they gave you a topic and you had like 20 minutes to make a presentation on it and then deliver it back to these people. So it's all pretty crazy, but that was really fun. So that they've been really big achievements. And the last one of those I get, well, actually the GDST one, so getting the, you know, sort of finalist to Trailblazer of the Year last year was amazing. And I think just prior to that as well, I won a award for my dissertation. So it was like the IMechE Best Project Award. So they picked like the best engineering dissertation, they said was mine. So that was pretty awesome as well. So I'd say they've been real standouts for me.
And quite rightly, they're incredible achievements, and you know you're right to be really, really proud, and very well done on all of those. I was just thinking about the MotoGP. I mean, for myself and many of the audience members, I would imagine that the closest they might have in terms of knowledge of that is the Netflix series Drive to Survive, and seeing the scenes. I would imagine it's very, very different to MotoGP.
No, that's a great comparison though, like you say. So yeah, MotoGP is sort of the Formula One of the two-wheeled world. So yeah, very similar sort of highest level you can get in terms of motorcycle racing and pressure racing all over the world, all those kind of things. And yeah, nowhere near as glamorous as it seems on the surface like it would be. Even just working in the British Superbike paddock, I know that it's, you know, there's a lot of racing around the country at 3 o'clock in the morning to pick up new motorcycle frames and things like that. It's not all fun and games.
So there's not going to be a Netflix series anytime soon.
It would be great if there was.
And also the other thing, Emily, that I thought was really interesting was you talking about the things that you feel less comfortable doing, the presentation side of things. And I think that's a really important point that you make about putting yourself out of your comfort zone. For many of the girls listening today, is yes, it's some things that, you know, we don't necessarily naturally enjoy or feel as if we're as strong as, but it's really important to embrace those challenges. I think that's a really valuable point that you've made.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me it's always the realization that you don't actually know how that is going to help you in the future. So things like those presentations were, yeah, really good in terms of, I think I've noticed confidence in interviews myself. So when I got this job about 12 months ago, 2 years ago, the one I'm at currently. And so I've sort of been through all those kind of award interview kind of situations, done a couple of keynote speech panels, bits and pieces, and actually then going into a job interview, which I was really, really, really wanted the job for, I really noticed a difference in my confidence in general approach, because I just felt a lot calmer. And you almost think, well, if I can stand up in front of 80 people and talk to them about myself, actually doing an interview with a couple of people probably isn't going to be too bad. So it's kind of those hidden benefits that you don't realize. And even delivering presentations at work. So at JCB particularly, I had to deliver a few presentations to the chief engineers to get sign off on a couple of projects. And a couple of years prior to when I did those, I would have just been like really scared and kind of get myself really worked up about it. But you kind of just get used to being in those situations, and then you are able to deliver them a little bit better, I think.
That's really good advice. And, you know, I certainly encourage audience members today to sort of take the opportunities where they can to present in front of others, because it, like you say, you never know when that will come in useful in the future.
No. And
sorry, go on, Emily.
And it's never easy, so it's never going to get any better. So I feel like the more that you can put yourself into those situations, at least you kind of just feel a little bit more comfortable and slightly less terrified.
Yes, good point. And Emily, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but tell us about a time that you've experienced failure, and what did you do to overcome that?
So the failure question is a great one. So one of Tim Ferriss's questions that he asks interviewees is what is your favorite failure? And I think it's such a fantastic question because it's so important. So for me, I think if I looked at it after I was at JCB for 6 years, and my failure definitely was deciding to move to a motorcycle helmet company. So I got I got attracted in by some really, really good marketing, very, very good social media teams, and people that can kind of talk the talk. And you assume, well, my failure really was to do enough research into the opportunity and the company and do a bit more digging. On the surface, it looked amazing, and I was going to be in this testing and development department, and part of all this. I got there, and the the test facility was just a corner of a warehouse, and they basically had two machines that no one knew how to use, and I was joining as the testing department. So I and the opportunity, it was awful. So the company was terrible, the products were terrible, and I really lost a lot of self-confidence. So that was a really, really difficult situation. I really lost my way. But again, with this kind of confidence, I just knew I couldn't be there any longer. And with the support, again, sort of family and my husband he was just like, we'd moved into our house a couple of weeks before this sort of period, and he was like, you just need to hand your notice in, you need to leave. And I'd been looking at other jobs, and I think I'd got a couple of applications in, but I hadn't really got anything lined up. I'd got a 3-month notice period, and I was confident that I would be able to seek out new opportunities and interview a lot better if I was in a better headspace and not working in a terrible job. So so I did that. I handed my notice in with nothing to go to. And then I think it was a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from my current company asking me to interview. So got an interview with them in a couple of weeks, and sort of, I think it was after an hour of my interview ending, I'd got a job offer from them. So it all worked out. But I do believe that if I hadn't have had my notice in and kind of had cleared my headspace, I don't know that I would have got this job, because I don't think I would have interviewed very well, because my confidence is just terrible.
Sorry to hear that. What is there any advice you could give to members of the audience about guarding against that for themselves in any career, any job opportunity, I guess, really?
So do your research is the biggest one. So while I sort of say I'm not, I've always, I've sort of been talking like I'm happy to like take these opportunities and take these chances. Actually, this one has taught me probably the biggest lesson that I've ever had, and I think it is to really appreciate how things can appear online very differently to how they actually are in reality. So that job, it was during 2021 COVID time. So it was all virtual interviews. I didn't get to go down. So the first time I was on site was the first morning I started. So I would always recommend to get down to wherever it is you're going to be working, even if it's just popping in, scoping it out, meeting the people that you're going to work with. I think that's really important, because you can immediately tell if you're going to gel with them. Because if I had gone down to the site, met the kind of people that were working there, and seen the facility, I would have ran away. Like, absolutely would not have taken the job. So I think that's a really key one. But also the underlying thing is, even though it was an awful situation to be in, I think it has improved my skills as an engineer, and now I've kind of rebuilt my confidence. So I know that job role doesn't define me. That sort of small brief period. So it's almost helped now, and kind of being confident that you can push through these times, and actually things will be better, and not be afraid. Not kind of shy away from things maybe going a bit wrong.
Thank you for sharing that, Emilie. And also, one thing that comes across very strongly is your reflective nature. You will reflect back and gain from good or bad experiences to try and forever be sort of moving forwards and improving opportunities for yourself.
Absolutely.
Moving on. If you cast your mind back to your 10-year-old self, what would you say to her knowing what you do today?
That's a great question. So I think my 10-year-old self, I would say, just keep chasing those dreams that you've got in your head that you kind of probably think you're a bit crazy that that's what you want to do. Keep chasing them, because even if you don't get to exactly where you want to, you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun getting there.
That's great advice, actually. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I like that.
Absolutely.
And then one of the aspects that people, if they go to your blog, they'll see is that you're an avid traveller. Can you tell us about the most memorable places you have visited and how they've had an impact on you?
So I think so growing up, we were very fortunate to get to go. Used to go across to France sort of on family holidays quite a lot, especially with having, well, we used to have great amount of holidays at the high school. It was something that was a real real bonus. So my parents used to really like to take the opportunity to be able to get across to France as much as we could. And I really think that having that experience from such a young age really opened my eyes to travel and to kind of seeing that there's so much of the world out there. There's always different fun cultures, different languages, and actually with languages, sort of the value of learning a language and being able to speak something else. So again, something else that was amazing at the high school was so I did French and Spanish at the high school, straight through to GCSEs, and French is still something that I'm still sort of maintaining to this day. And I just think that skill of being able to speak a different language is really important. So I think that kind of taught me all that at a young age. It instilled my sort of adventuring in me. And then when I was, in fact, when I was working at the first dealership and was kind of wondering about getting into racing, but not quite sure, I went over to New York by myself. So the first time I sort of flew long haul, I went out to New York and met one of my best friends was doing a year at uni in Maine. So flew over to New York. We had like a few days in New York together, and then we got a Greyhound bus up to Boston. Spent a few days there, and then sort of specifically on the on the journey back to Boston, my friend went back up to Maine from there, so I was on my own on the bus, and I got myself a great playlist on. I was sort of looking at daydreaming out the window after having like this such an amazing, incredible trip with my friend, and it was that moment when I was like, let's do this racing thing. Let's give this a go. I think this is what I want to be doing. I'm just going to see what happens. And then when I got home from that trip, I basically compiled a speculative sort of cover letter, and sort of updated my CV, all the fun stuff. And I spent like days researching every single race team that I could find contact details for online. And I just emailed I think I must have sent about 80 emails out, just kind of asking if they had any opportunities coming up for the season, which was starting in a couple of months' time. And yeah, then it kind of went from there, which is where the team got back in touch with me, and then I quit and all these things. So but yeah, that trip specifically really kind of prompted that. So that's good. I'm always going to think about that one.
It's nice to have those moments that you look back on and realize that's when quite a big decision was made, and where you
Yeah.
can almost like sounds like you can almost pinpoint it to a certain part of the journey. So that travel clearly is very important to you.
Mm.
I'm just conscious of time, Emily. There's a few more questions I'd like to ask.
Okay.
Can you talk us through what a normal day at work looks like for you, if one exists?
So yeah, that kind of is the beauty, I guess, of my role, is that definitely don't have a normal day.
Yeah.
But my current role is pretty much sort of computer based. So yeah, spend, as most roles are these days, unfortunately, spend a lot of time on the computer, and do a real sort of wide ranging of stuff. So at the moment with our programs, I'm doing quite a lot of sort of supplier engagement. So developing things with suppliers, going through requirements and checking that they're making things as we want them, developing some designs, getting things released. So at the moment we're in a bit of a kind of a random stage. So it's building things up, and then we're going to be going into doing sort of more practical sort of trialing things in the sort of coming year, which is going to be fun. So there'll be some shooting at things, which I'm looking forward to. And that's about as much as I can say.
Sounds really more fascinating now that you've mentioned that. Brilliant, thank you. And then just a couple of more things before we finish. You've recently received the STEM Ambassador, 30 hours of engagement achievement. What is your favourite part about being a STEM Ambassador?
I think for me, it's so my STEM stuff is really important, and I think it's a really good way of kind of giving back. And I'm really passionate about trying to inspire the next generation. And I think I'm a real advocate for if you can see it, you can be it. And I think the more people that I can kind of speak to and they can say, oh, okay, I could be an engineer when I'm older, and I might get to shoot at things and test various things and blow up JCB engines and all these fun things. Um, you're gonna hopefully, for me, if I can like reach just like one person in the whole of my STEM ambassadoring, that gives them the confidence to go and do what they want to do, even if it isn't to do with engineering, but if it's just gives someone the confidence that they can do what they want to be doing. That's why I do it, really.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm sure you're an absolute inspiration to many. Before we finish, Emilie, and you touched about on this earlier, but is there a message you'd like to leave the girls who are at school today about what they might want to consider about a career in engineering?
So I think if you're interested in engineering, I'm a real advocate for degree apprenticeships. So we've touched on them. I think it's such a good way of getting into engineering because you just get so much experience, and the support you get from your company is amazing. So I really feel like you get a lot more out of your degree, actually. So for me, things like my dissertation that I said I won an award for, that was a work project that was very much supported by work with. I could do well because it was my job. I could do it in my work day. And I feel like a few of my colleagues kind of helped with a bit of analysis that I wanted to do that was kind of above and beyond. So you have all that support that is just brilliant. It's invaluable. So I think I would really recommend looking into that route. It's really hard work, don't get me wrong, like having to work full time and study at the same time, but it's really worth it. And I also think unless you've got a like maybe specific field in engineering that you're interested in, I think having like a general mechanical engineering degree is a really good one because you can go into so many different areas instead of kind of feeling like you have to specialize too much. Kind of don't worry if you're roughly interested in, maybe it's electrical engineering, maybe it's mechanical or whatever, but kind of that level I think is great because it opens so many doors to you potentially for where your career is going to take you.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Great advice. We are sadly almost out of time, so Emilie, thank you so much for giving your time to speak to me today and to let others listen to our conversation. You are an inspiration, and I've been inspired by this about what things that we can do in our school to ensure there is that sort of flow of female engineers coming into the profession. Please remember, you're always welcome back at Shrewsbury High School. I know I'll be in touch to try and get you into school at some point in the near future. And we're always excited to see what's next in store for you. So do stay in touch, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.